Hello and welcome to Wrestling Academy Episode 3. I am your Headmaster Michael Klasek, and with me, as always, is the self-appointed Homecoming King Samee Junio. Samee, how are you doing?
I am on fire, Michael. Last night, I went out for the first time in a long time. We're recording this the weekend of my birthday. We went out. My birthday happens to be Halloween, so it was the weekend before Halloween. Everyone's going nuts. I went to the dance party, and for some reason or another, I was possessed to posture like a wrestler on the dance floor. And
you were texting me, and I was like, "This is insane. I need to know everything right now. Tell me everything."
I was doing some suckets. Doing that like deep lunge, you know, like
yeah,
when you're on
sure.
and doing this, going from side to side. Didn't know my knees were capable of doing that. Then we did the electric slide. And last night I texted you that I was doing super kicks during the electric slide, but after sitting with it, later on, there was another electric slide, and I did it again, and I corrected myself. I was like, oh, I was doing V-triggers without the run-up, not super kicks. But I was on beat, and it was just, like, the posturing, the in-ring posturing is something that I didn't fully get right away. I think until last night. Like, when you're feeling yourself, and doing that little bit extra, it just feels like the world is in your hands, and I get it.
Yeah, really takes you to the next level.
I feel next level today for sure.
I had one request. Like, did you hit the Randy Orton? Did you do that one?
I did this one that you sent after you sent it. That felt good. I was doing the Okada hand.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And the dance floor wasn't empty, so like I was getting into people's ways.
Were they scared? Were they intrigued? How were you being perceived at this party?
There were some moments where I knew that I was being too much, and there were moments where I felt like I saw the glint of like knowing, like when I was doing suckets, and there was and I was, looking around, was like, I think you know what I'm doing, and I think you want to do it too.
So I guess my one question is, what two kinds of suckets? Were you doing the DX or were you doing the NWO?
I was doing the DX initially, and then I went to the NWO because I do feel like that one's, I don't know, that one just felt right last night.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the NWO is a little bit more disrespectful because you're like, I'm presenting what to suck. You know what I mean? I'm presenting it, This is it. Suck. Whereas I feel like the DXX is theoretical, It could just be,
Could be anywhere. Could be left, could be right.
It could be suck anywhere. You know what I mean?
And welcome to Suck Anywhere, a podcast about...
Name of the episode, Suck Anywhere.
How are you doing?
I'm okay. I feel I'm just going to say it. I mean, this is the most middle-aged shit I've ever said. But the other day, my back has just been driving me crazy. So I was at the mall, and as I was like entering, I saw that they had one of those massage chairs. You pop in $2, you get 8 minutes of massage. So I was like, oh, you know what? Like, back's killing me. Like, let me just hit this massage chair really quick. Look at my wallet, don't have $2, but it has a little credit card reader. I pop in my credit card, and the timer just shoots up to 30 minutes. And so I'm just like stuck in this like 30-minute massage chair, and I'm like trying to find a cancel button. I'm trying to find a less intense button, and like everything else about this chair is broken. And so I am just locked into a massage for 30 minutes, and it's on high. And so it is just like sticking plastic and rolling me. And I was like so distraught. I didn't know what to do. I texted you being like, Samee, I fucked up. I don't know what to do. And so it's taken truly 4 days for my back to just return to me and feel normal. Because I know that there are some massages where the whole point is you go and they kind of rough you up a little bit and then your muscles feel better. This was not that. This just truly felt like I was in a jigsaw trap or something. I just really felt like I was being punished. And then my pride started to mess with me. And I was like, what? You don't think I'm tough enough to do this? And so I like forced myself to stay in the chair. And there were so many teenagers entering the mall, and they all were like taking notice of, why is this guy doing, like, because again, if you had been, look, I was laying in the chair, I was trying to get my neck in the neck thing. And so I was just truly like laid back, being like, and like teenagers are walking, and I'm sure I'm in a bunch of TikToks or something, because it was too much. And then I walked away hurt. I didn't walk away feeling good.
I just, number one, it is wild of you to even pay money for those chairs. Like, I have seen people sitting in those chairs, just like waiting for their people to be done shopping. But you actually partake.
Yeah,
that is wild of you.
This is not the first massage chair at the mall I've used. This is the first mall. This is in this particular mall, because normally I go to one that has way better massage chairs. But I don't know what kind of BS operation the Eagle Rock Mall is perpetrating on these massage chairs, but they need to get their act together, because let's just say Burbank doesn't do it like that. Burbank knows how to. Burbank knows how to treat you if you're getting a massage chair massage.
I just don't, I love that you texted me, because the spirit of this message was like, you were frantic. It felt frantic. Like, I fucked up. I'm stuck in this massage chair.
It's one of those things where you reach out, like, can you hold this anxiety with me? Because I made a mistake and I don't know what to do.
But the thing is, you're not buckled in. Nobody's watching over you. Why didn't you stand up?
That's like something that I need to talk to my therapist about, because as soon as that timer hit 30, I was like, I'm trapped. I can't walk away. I have to suffer. And at a certain point, I was like, I need to prove that I can suffer, just to no one, to myself. And I was like, I could have just gone about my day, but instead I messed up my own back just to prove a point to no one.
Can I tell you, as a former massage therapist, you don't have to overcome massage pain. You really don't.
So, as a massage therapist, you're telling me massage should generally feel good.
Right. Unless it's like an actual verbal contract between you and your massage therapist. Like, I need to work through this pain, or they'll be like, okay, this is going to be painful. If there's no warning of excruciating pain that's happening to you, just leave. Michael, just leave.
I wish you had told me that when I was texting you, because you kind of went radio silent. And I was like, all right, I've lost Samee. It's up to me now.
I gotta go through this now that Samee knows. I have to finish the 30 minutes.
Yeah, I need to check in 30 minutes later to let them know that I really...
I'm sorry I went radio silent. I didn't know what I was doing, but
It's fine. You're busy. You got a whole life. Anyways, so Samee, this is Wrestling Academy. What is Wrestling Academy? Welcome to Wrestling Academy. This is not the massage podcast. What is Wrestling Academy to those who don't know?
Oh, Michael. So wrestling is an overwhelming thing to become a fan of. I'm a new fan, and I've stuck with it because Michael, a lifelong wrestling fan, has developed this way of introducing somebody to wrestling where it's not intimidating, it's not gatekeepy, and it's a real fun time. So Wrestling Academy is a podcast that we started so that we can welcome other wrestling curious people into the warm, sweaty embrace of wrestling.
I mean, if you're new or you're just getting back into wrestling, we're here for you, and we're trying to break it down and keep it fun. And speaking of fun, Samee, what's today's episode about?
We are covering the 18-month long rivalry between Kazuchika Okada and Kenny Omega.
And so for people who don't really know, this, I would say, of kind of modern times in wrestling, this is considered by a lot of people to be one of, if not the greatest modern series of matches. So this is like I think a good thing of like, Samee, how did you become aware of this series or this rivalry?
Well, we had wrestling days when I lived in Los Angeles, and those were basically days where I would go over to Michael's apartment. We would watch 6 hours of wrestling, and at the first wrestling day, Michael, you played this match as the last thing that we watched, and it is an hour long, and my life is obviously changed.
We watched a whole smattering of different matches, and the climax, the finale of the night, was I played the very first match in this series to just sort of be like, oh, let's watch some hard-hitting wrestling. And how did you feel watching it?
I was definitely like, I was shook up by it, and it had an incredibly different feel from the other things that we were watching. Like we watched the Undertaker and Mick Foley Hell in a Cell match, which was intense in its own way, but is also very short. So this match in particular is nearly an hour long, right?
There are 4 matches in the series, and the shortest one is like 30 minutes long.
Yeah, so like it was just an intensity that we didn't see yet during wrestling day. And Kenny and Okada are just incredible athletes, and it seems like they really trust each other too, because they were pushing each other to the limit in the match. And so yeah, it's quite a spectacle to see, and if you can, and if you're curious to watch it, please definitely do watch them all.
And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So for people who have maybe been listening the past couple series, we've been kind of delving into different parts of wrestling. So the first episode, we were kind of talking about WWE and what's that like. And then we were talking last episode about independent pro wrestling in America. What is that like? So today we're going to be jumping largely into like, what is New Japan Pro Wrestling? Because that's where this entire feud takes place over in Japan. And so things are a little bit different over there. So we'll try to give you as much context as we can. But again, I think we were talking a little bit before we started recording, like this is a very dense thing, so we're probably going to be tossing a lot of information at you. So in the interest of keeping everything as at a nice little clip, we're probably going to be glossing over lots of stuff. So, but our hope is that if you find stuff and you're more curious about it, you can jump in and start looking, because that's I think the most fun part about getting into a new thing like New Japan is you'll be like, Shinsuke Nakamura wrestled there. Yeah, what are his matches? Who's Sonata? What is LIJ? What's going on there? And so, like, the more you get into it, the more your curiosity can lead you to all kinds of incredible places. Because I think what we both discovered in doing research for this is the amount of depth and complexity in every single rivalry. Every person is in a crazy, like, 3-match series that takes 4 years with everybody else. So delving into this one specifically, we're really going to try to keep it to Kenny, keep it to Okada, and keep it to this rivalry, and hopefully we can do them justice.
100%. And so, Michael, do you remember how you got into this rivalry specifically?
Yeah, so this is actually what I am stoked about. This is I was absolutely along for this ride when it was happening. Nice. in 2017, 2018. And so I think the thing to really keep in mind about this rivalry specifically was a lot of different things were happening. And in a way, like fairly or unfairly, I think these two wrestlers got put in a position to represent way more things than perhaps they wanted to. And I think that's also what adds to the mystique of this rivalry, where
100%.
So many things. So it's like New Japan as an entity was becoming globally famous during this time. And so because of the rivalry between these two specifically, it really pushed New Japan into a large global conversation about pro wrestling. And so I think at a certain point, the wrestlers themselves take on this like second, even more legendary status about like who they are and what ideas they represent. And we'll get into that a little bit more when we jump into the rivalry specifically. But I remember hearing about Kenny Omega and being like, he's fighting in New Japan. He's about to have a match against one of their best guys, Okada. And so I stayed up until 2 or 3 in the morning to watch New Japan World, to like watch this series of matches take place in Tokyo, and it was great.
Okay, so yeah, do you want to tell us what New Japan Pro Wrestling is?
Yeah, so I think another thing to keep in mind too is like pro wrestling as a thing in Japan and in America, both of them started similarly, but went on their own kind of parallel journeys. So from what I could understand in doing my research, Japanese professional wrestling evolved out of both like catch wrestling, which is what Catch as Catch Can, which is what everything kind of evolved out of. And then also sumo wrestling in like the 50s. It all kind of percolated until we got to pro wrestling as we know it in Japan now. And like, not to say there weren't like cross-pollination and inspiration from everywhere. That's kind of how wrestling goes. So inside of this ecosystem, New Japan Pro Wrestling developed as like one of, if not the biggest promotions in Japan. Started in 1971 by Antonio Inoki. And I would say in Japanese pro wrestling, I think, specifically in New Japan, the presentation is very much trying to portray professional wrestling as more of a like fight sport, like MMA or boxing or something like that. So a lot of that. So Antonio Inoki, he pioneered this technique called strong style, and so that's largely what exists in New Japan is those hard strikes, submission based wrestling. It all is supposed to have like an air of legitimate fight sport, even though it's still predetermined in the same way that like WWE is. The goals between American and Japanese pro wrestling are a little bit different, and so the traditions between the two are just like a little bit different. So because like, for example, when we were watching that episode of Monday Night Raw in the first episode, a lot of those matches, people would run in and there would be like operatic, soliloquies and stuff like that. And I would say on the whole, New Japan Pro Wrestling doesn't really do stuff like that. Most of the matches, the stories that are being told are contained to inside of the ring. Over the course of the match is where you're learning about the characters and what they want from each other, and the stakes get raised in that way. And then they'll do like press conferences and stuff afterwards. And so the whole point is, because it's supposed to be viewed as like a legitimate fight sport, most of the time matches have like a clean, decisive victory. So one person beats one other person. Nobody runs in and cheats or does anything like that generally.
There's no frantic disqualification bell like we heard in Monday Night Raw 1999.
Yeah, not usually. I mean, again, it's like exceptions to every rule, but I would say generally it's presented more like exhibition matches. This fighter fights this fighter and one will win. Whereas in the WWE, someone runs somebody over with a car and then they have a match. That's not really how New Japan does things, not generally. And then I think the other thing, a
little bit more honorable.
Yeah, it's just a little bit more like this legitimate fighter is fighting this legitimate fighter, as opposed to these men are in a blood feud because when they were kids, one guy set the other guy on fire. They don't do that.
This man threw the other man off the Rudy Poo Bridge.
Exactly. It's more like this guy thinks he's tougher than this guy. Let's find out. So I would say the other thing, too, that I think is important to note about like the Japanese tradition is I was trying to do a little bit more research into it, but it's called the King's Road. And it's kind of a philosophy in storytelling where basically all you want to do is when you fight an opponent, the next time you fight them, you want to raise the stakes from what you did last time. So like generally what that means is it gets more violent, more the moves become a little bit more severe, and you kind of just want to top what you did last time. So that builds to where people fight 2, 3, 4 times, and then that's where you have really dangerous spots where guys are getting dropped on their heads and necks and all kinds of stuff. And so really brutal injuries occur using that philosophy. But it leads to just some really physically intense matches, which is what people like about New Japan Pro Wrestling. And I would also say at this time, we're back in 2016, 2017 era, is people were largely burnt out because WWE was kind of the only game in town, pretty much. And so people got they thought it was pretty safe, pretty watered down. And so most like real wrestling fans would kind of, the understanding was always like, oh, if you want like the real wrestling, like you got to check out New Japan. And then you watch New Japan and it's like, oh, you're seeing these hard strikes, these hard hits, these hard guys getting dropped on their heads. And you're like, this as a fan of the sport is what I've been looking for. And so that swell started to really pick up. And so by the time that this feud kicked off properly, a lot of people who had been sort of burnt out and walked away from wrestling were starting to get intrigued and lured back in by stuff that was happening all over the world, but a lot of it was being concentrated in New Japan and the choices that they were making. Oh, and one last thing before we get started is another major thing in Japanese pro wrestling is everybody is largely associated with a faction, a group of people. And I think it's just a way to, create storylines like this faction is fighting this faction. So if you get a new wrestler, he joins this faction, he automatically gets to start being in a feud with this faction. And if that's the case, you can keep some of your top stars a little more protected. Samee, let's learn a little bit more about these factions, shall we?
Well, let's talk about Kazuchika Okada first, and then we'll get into his faction. So Kazuchika Okada is this 6'3" guy. He debuts in 2004 with Ultimo Dragon in, and I'm so sorry for this pronunciation, Torreon, Mexico. And he does a lot. He learns a lot of lucha libre style wrestling, which I think is fun. That the style of wrestling that really clicked in with me at GCW pops right back up while we're researching Kazuchika Okada, which I really wouldn't have put those two together. I love wrestling, etc. So he wrestles with Ultimo Dragon from 2004 through 2007. So he goes to New Japan in 2007, and then they send him over to the United States in 2010.
Kind of the philosophy in New Japan Pro Wrestling is it's called excursions. So you'll be sort of trained in the New Japan system, and then they'll kind of almost like Rumspringa or something. They'll be like, you know what, go wild, go to a different promotion, learn a different style, and see what you learn. So I think Okada's excursion was to America, where he wrestled for TNA, correct?
Yes, he did wrestle with TNA, and oh boy, did they bungle his Rumspringa. So Okada, from 2010 to 2011, he wrestles 36 times, and he loses 31 times. And this time period is so shameful that New Japan and TNA like basically sever their ties, because New Japan was like, what did you do with this man? You wasted his talents, and he will be returning to us. So he goes back to New Japan in 2012, and he's done being a chump, because outside of 2010 and 2011, where his losing percentage is very high, from his debut, he's kind of lost a lot. But before he was sent on his excursion, like, he was gaining a little bit of popularity with people, which was really fun to learn that everybody can still embrace a loser. Gives us a little bit of hope. Okada is returning to New Japan, and he comes in with a new gimmick called Rainmaker, and he's basically like, New Japan, I'm gonna make it fucking rain money, which they actually do with Okada Bucks. Every time he enters and every time it's a celebration, the Okada Bucks rain down from the ceiling. And I want to stop here for a question to you, Michael.
Yeah.
Have you ever made it rain?
I want to say yes, but I can't think of a specific story. So I got hit with the existential dread of I've never made it rain on anybody. That sucks.
Does it suck, or does it? I think it just like opens a door of opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's what I mean. It sucks that I haven't done it yet. Where I'm like, I gotta make it rain on somebody.
You gotta.
This is wild. No, I've never made it rain, but I will say Okada's entrance is unbelievable. He comes out in this like beautiful color, like different multicolored sequined robe, and like money is raining from the sky, and he really embodies the coolest dude in the world when he walks out. So it's like he was fully right to call his shot and be like, oh, actually, I'm the best. I'm not a loser like everybody in TNA thought I was. I'm amazing.
Yeah, I think vengeance is a great motivator, and he really came in. He dyes his hair blonde. He's 24 pounds heavier, so he's not in a junior heavyweight class. He's wrestling heavyweight now.
Comes back total beefcake, ready for the main event.
So a year after he debuts in New Japan, he challenges Hiroshi Tanahashi and drop kicks Hiroshi Tanahashi's teeth out of his face and takes the IWGP title away from him.
So he like wins the match. He wins the match and becomes
yeah, he wins the match. He goes home with 2 new teeth, and
to the winner goes the spoils, you know?
Yeah, truly. So I want to mention Gedo a little bit here, because Gedo basically stands by Okada since he re-debuts in New Japan in 2011. So Gedo works as Okada's manager. And can you explain what a wrestling manager is, Michael?
For those who don't know, it's like there's the wrestler and then there's the manager who's always kind of their little buddy. You know what I mean? Helps them come out to the ring, hypes them up a little bit, and is like sometimes will help the wrestler cheat to win. You know, that's sort of when you're watching wrestling, where you're just like, hey, how come that guy comes out with like a friend and then this guy doesn't? It's like, well, the friend is a manager. And so there's a bunch of different reasons outside of the story of wrestling as to why that kind of stuff is happening. So sometimes you want a wrestler who's just like a stoic badass, kind of like Okada. So when that's the case, you don't want to ruin their mystique by having them talk, because maybe they're not super experienced, or maybe it's just makes them seem tougher to have somebody else do their talking for them. And so they'll have somebody come out to like speak and be the mouthpiece for the character who gets to just stand there and look badass. Or, you know, maybe they need somebody to kind of show them the ropes, right? Where it's like, maybe it'll be a legendary wrestler from yesteryear will kind of show up and add legitimacy to this newer wrestler. And so there's a bunch of different reasons why someone would have a manager. But generally in storyline, it's like, this is my friend and I would do anything for my friend. It's kind of the bond that they have.
Right. So Gedo is bonded to Okada because he is in a faction, as Michael mentioned earlier about factions. Gedo is in this faction called Chaos, which Okada joined in 2012. Other member of Chaos, Shinsuke Nakamura, who we've spoken about and we love. Another member of this faction is Hiroshi Tanahashi, who Okada drop kicked, which isn't very nice to do.
So he comes back to New Japan, challenges the leader of Chaos, drop kicks his teeth out, and takes his title.
At the time, Shinsuke Nakamura is the leader of Chaos.
Okay.
So not yet, but he is drop kicking his buddy's teeth out for a title.
So like so he's coming in and he's like kind of already picking fights with the top guys in the faction, being like, no, I'm no young lion. Here I am. I'm the main event guy.
Exactly. So a little bit about Gedo. He has his own illustrious in-ring career as a wrestler. He ends up being a booker for New Japan.
And this is all behind the scenes, right?
Yeah, this is all behind the scenes, obviously. So he's a booker for New Japan. He also at some point is called the Dusty Rhodes of Japan, which I don't necessarily know what that means. Do you?
Yeah, so what they mean is Dusty Rhodes is a very, very famous wrestler from, 60s and 70s, and Cody Rhodes' father. Mm-hmm. And basically, he was a pioneer for the path in American wrestling from like independent territory promotions into like the bigger companies like WCW and WWE. And so basically Dusty Rhodes was both a behind the scenes producer and booker, but also a beloved character and wrestler, truly one of the most beloved wrestlers of all time. To call somebody the Dusty Rhodes of Japan is like high praise.
Sick. Cool. So that's Gedo. That's who is managing Okada. Okada takes the title from Tanahashi in 2012. And he retains the title for about 4 months. And what I saw through researching for this episode is that the title changes hands very quickly and it kind of seemed unceremonious as far as like the dates. It wasn't just like a year between switches. It was like 4 months, 3 months, 2 months. Question marks?
So I think probably what you're picking up on is there are a bunch of different ways to make somebody legitimate, to raise somebody's profile. And so one of those things is putting the title on them at all, right? So the IWGP Heavyweight title is the top title in New Japan. So to win that means ostensibly you're one of, if not the best wrestler in New Japan at that time, right? Mm-hmm. So to win the title at all is a big deal. To hold on to the title is also an even bigger deal. So I think sometimes you'll see periods where, let's say, two people are in a rivalry. So to show that both of these men are equals, you could have the title change hands between the two of them in really rapid succession, right? That could be one way. Or you could have a character hold on to the title for a very long time. Like a good example of that would be Roman Reigns in the WWE, has had the belt for 3 years. And so whether you like that or not, watching him walk into the arena, being like, this guy's been the champion for 3 years, that puts an air of legitimacy on him that you can't fake because he's had it for 3 years, And so I think sometimes when the title is moving around a lot, it really kind of depends on what stories they're trying to tell, like maybe there are shorter term payoffs that we're not aware of, or maybe it's building to being like, no one can hang on to this title. So the person who can, perhaps they're a huge deal, which I believe is what happens with Okada, correct?
Yeah, so between 2012 and 2016, the title basically switches between Okada and Tanahashi. AJ Styles gets in the mix, and Tetsuya Naito gets in the mix, who we'll cover a little bit later on, correct?
Yeah, he factors into this feud, yeah.
Okay, so Okada takes the title from Naito in 2016, and I mentioned 2016 specifically right now because it is a big year because Shinsuke Nakamura, head of Chaos, announces his departure from New Japan. And at his going away party, someone grabs a mic, calls Shinsuke Nakamura a coward because he's leaving before he can wrestle them. The person grabbing the mic is Kenny Omega.
Let's get into who is Kenny Omega.
Michael, Kenny Omega?
Kenny Omega is a Canadian professional wrestler. He debuted in 2001. And what I know about him, he loves video games and he loves Terminator. And that's kind of what he's all about. When he first debuted, he was wrestling all over the independent scene in America. And he caught the attention of the WWE in around 2005. And they sent him to their sort of developmental promotion. So basically the way that they work is they'll send you to a place and you could get experience as a professional wrestler, they keep tabs on you. If they like you, they move you into the WWE system. That's sort of how one of the ways they develop their talent. And so Kenny joins Deep South Pro Wrestling. He's there for about a year, and by all accounts, he really didn't enjoy how things were being done there. He asked for his release in 2006. And it just seemed like a very interesting parallel, because it's like, oh, Okada also had this like very formative experience of like going to a major company in America and being like, you know what? Actually, I don't like this at all. And so Kenny leaves. I think he's considering a bunch of different things. He's like kind of burnt out on pro wrestling. He's like, maybe I'll go and do MMA. Maybe I'll go do something else. And then it's not until the way the story goes is like a wrestler in Japan, Kota Ibushi, caught his eye. And so Kenny was like, let me see if I can get over to Japan, because it seems like they're doing what I like to do. And so Kenny bounces around a bunch of different independent promotions, goes to Japan, goes to a promotion called Dramatic Dream Team, DDT Pro Wrestling. It's a Japanese promotion. And I would say in a lot of ways, based on my research, they seem very similar to the promotion we covered last week, GCW. So they do a lot of intense stuff, a lot of funny stuff, a lot of like bizarre, crazy, what I know them for is just over the top, crazy comedy matches. And so like Kenny was building this reputation for himself of this guy who would do these like really intense matches, but then also these super goofy, funny matches. And I think one of the most notorious kind of comedy matches he did was for a promotion called Stardom. And basically, real quick, in Japanese pro wrestling, there are female specific companies. It's called Joshi Wrestling, and that's like female specific. So he was doing a rare intergender match for a Joshi promotion, Stardom, where he fought a 9-year-old girl. So Samee, you've seen this match. How did you feel watching this 3-minute exhibition where Kenny Omega fights a 9-year-old girl?
I say this often when you ask me how I feel about a wrestling match. And I felt overwhelmed. The movement, because I thought when you set it up for me before we watched it, kind of. And I initially just assumed like the little girl was just gonna pummel Kenny, like, and he would sell some throws and be done with it. But they actually get into some wild stuff. I think there's like a scissor kick, there's scissor hold movement. Yeah, it was I mean, he definitely just,
like at one point like picks her up and then like on his knee he like grabs the head, he throws her into a turnbuckle. But I will also say the little girl gives as good as she gets, you know. She hits him with tornado DDTs. She does a 619 on him. So Doug, he's not beating up this young girl. She is giving as good as she gets. And I think the main thing I took away when I was watching it is I think it speaks to the level of talent Kenny Omega has, because you can 100% see that even though he's making it scary for people, he's 100% taking care of this girl, and she is 100% safe the entire time. So again, it's like you can see him selling the physicality, but if you really watch, you can see like she never makes contact. And the reason it looks so devastating is it's all on his face of being like, you know, and you're just like, oh, this guy's the devil. This guy's so bad. So to me, it was like what I read is he was brought in because he was pretty much, this little girl was a huge wrestling fan, and she really wanted to get involved in wrestling. And so this was like her dream. And so to make her dream come true, they went out to Kenny Omega, and it was basically, the understanding was like, we trust you to take care of this child who really wants to do this. And so he was like, so I did it. And it was actually really controversial. A lot of wrestling. A lot of wrestling purists were like, Kenny Omega destroyed pro wrestling. No one will ever take us seriously again because this grown man fought a competitive match against a 9-year-old girl. I'll say, like, before I started being able to reliably take people to independent shows, the match I would send people who were wrestling curious was always this match, because it's 3 minutes long. It's it's got everything. It's kind of funny. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of cute, but it's also got the like, oh, like scare factor that wrestling has. And it's like, it really is one of the best samplers you can give somebody if you're trying to get them into wrestling, of being like, no, see, they don't take it super serious. See, like,
Right.
you know, the wrestlers are funny. Like, check it out.
It's like essentially like wrestling isn't that serious, but it is that serious, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think that is honestly the most perfect summary of wrestling. It's just like, it is both not that serious and also twice as serious as you think.
Oh man. Michael, would you ever wrestle a little girl?
I mean, no. Of course not. No way. I don't trust. I'm not a professional like Kenny Omega. Like I don't trust myself to even like do a fake super kick to somebody. I was like, no, I'm going to catch him in the neck on accident and end somebody's career. Like, no way.
Fair.
So that's Kenny Omega. He's been bouncing around the sort of the independent scene, America, Japan, doing like impressive technical matches, doing broad, funny comedy matches, been making a name for himself. And then around 2014, he shows up in New Japan Pro Wrestling as Kenny the Cleaner Omega. And basically the whole bit behind that character is, like the Terminator, he's going to clean up the junior heavyweight division. And so I think something that I've kind of noticed is they have the weight class, junior heavyweight, heavyweight, and it's not necessarily a real like weight class division. It's more a way to delineate up and comers from main event guys. So if you're in the heavyweight division, that means you're one of the top main event guys. And so if you're in the junior heavyweights, that means you're still kind of making a name for yourself in New Japan.
Okay.
So
it's like a junior varsity.
Exactly. And so Kenny Omega, when he joins a group called the Bullet Club. The Bullet Club is a heel group and a faction like we were talking about in New Japan. And they're made up largely, especially when they first debuted, as outside, like foreigners invading New Japan. And so they were very reminiscent of American groups like D-Generation X or NWO. And they would even pay homage to those groups by bringing back the Suck It and also the Too Sweet or whatever. So
Too Sweet?
Yeah, so the way you would do it if you were NWO is you make the wolf and then you make the wolves kiss. Too Sweet.
Ah, I didn't know they were kissing.
I don't know if they are, but that's how I've always looked at it.
Okay.
So the thing about the Bullet Club that was so special is, you know how I said there are those like Japanese wrestling traditions where it was like clean finishes, nobody really cheats or interferes or does any of that kind of stuff. Bullet Club disregarded all of that. They were portrayed as insanely disrespectful foreigners invading Japan, like not taking any of the customs seriously, disrespecting everything, wrestling in a lot more of a Western style. And this made them insanely popular in New Japan. People were like, who are these guys? And not just in New Japan, it made them popular in the entire world. Like there was a stretch of maybe 4 or 5 years where you couldn't go anywhere in the world, certainly not any wrestling event, without seeing 100 Bullet Club t-shirts.
I love that.
The designs were everywhere. Everybody loved the Bullet Club. And again, it started to put eyes on New Japan in a global way because everybody was hearing about this Bullet Club. And they're like, this new D-Generation X, this new NWO, they're starting in Japan, and it started getting people interested and intrigued. So in 2016, 2 years after he debuts, Kenny Omega kicks out the current leader, AJ Styles, after he loses to the leader of Chaos, Shinsuke Nakamura. He kicks AJ Styles out, and he ostensibly becomes the new leader of the Bullet Club in 2016. So, for the past 8 years, Kenny Omega has been building a name for himself as like one of the hottest wrestlers in the world. He becomes the head of one of the hottest groups in the world, and he's wrestling for like one of the hottest up-and-coming factions in the world. And so this guy is like hotter than hot right now. So rolling into this feud, this dude's stock is at like quite possibly the highest it will ever be.
So Kenny's worldwide popularity would be scary, except he's going toe to toe with the ace of New Japan, Kazuchika Okada.
And so in 2016 is where this feud between these two begins. So we're going to start at an event called the G1 Climax. And so for people who don't know, the G1 Climax is like a tournament, a sort of a month-long tournament where every wrestler in New Japan fights every other wrestler in New Japan. And whoever wins the G1 Climax gets a guaranteed title shot at Wrestle Kingdom, which is like their top event. It's like WrestleMania for people who might know what that is. But it's like New Japan's top event is called Wrestle Kingdom. You get to fight the champion for the title at Wrestle Kingdom if you win the tournament. You win a little briefcase. And once you win the briefcase, it's not necessarily a guarantee. Like, you're carrying it around and people can challenge you for the briefcase and they can take it from you and then they have the title shot and you don't or whatever. So we get to the finals of the G1 Climax. Kenny Omega is fighting this guy named Hiroki Goto. And I just want to shout out, Hiroki Goto he has such a sweet mustache. Like, I don't know a ton about him, but every time I've seen him, I've always been like, dude, that is a sick mustache. So Kenny beats Hiroki Goto to win the G1 Climax, becoming the first foreigner to ever do that in the history of New Japan. So he wins the briefcase, and he goes on to challenge Okada, the current champion, at Wrestle Kingdom. Kenny Omega rolls into Wrestle Kingdom with the briefcase to challenge Okada for the first time. Samee, you watched this match without any context.
Zero.
Walking into this first match, having what little context you now have, how did it feel on the rewatch for you?
I'll say it again. Overwhelming. These dudes are battering each other. They're top athletes, and there's just, I don't really know how to put it in words, but when you're watching two people in the possibly prime of their lives doing what they've trained to do for years, it feels delicious. Does that make sense?
100, absolutely.
So this tastes very good.
And it is, I agree. I 100% agree with you. And I think the main thing is like, it's always one of those things, like as a shitty student, I've always been like, what's the difference between an A and an A plus? And I really feel like watching these two guys, I agree with you, as popular as they've ever been in the primes of their career, going head to head, you're like, oh, this is what A plus looks like. This is what 100% looks like. This is what the best looks like. And then, you're used to seeing stuff that's really good. And then when you see the best, you understand like, oh, what a wide gulf between an A and an A plus is. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're like, the best and the best of the best is actually, there's so much distance between the two.
Right, which it's an honor that you showed me this match like at the end of our first wrestling day, but it has also kind of like, I don't want to say ruined everything else, but it's like my initial feeling sometimes after watching a wrestling match is, wasn't that long, and I'm like, wait, hold on a second, like calm your tits. Like, Okada and Omega did something extraordinary. Like,
yeah, and they're also, for context for you, right, to maybe manage your expectations, like they are in the top event for their promotion in the main. So they're in the main event of the top event for the top title in the top of their career. Of course, they're going to wrestle for 45 minutes to an hour, of course. Whereas if you're watching WWE TV, they wrestle every week. They're trying they're trying to not get hurt. So they need to move their stories along in other ways, which is why the matches will be like 8 to 10 minutes long if you're lucky, or it'll be a 20-minute segment where they talk and nobody really fights, right? That's how they're moving their stories forward. Whereas in New Japan, they're telling the story in the ring. They're not doing like promos. They're not doing any of this. So they need to build that for you when they walk in. That's exactly what happened. And I also remember watching this when it happened live. And I didn't know when I was watching this in 2017, I did not know who Okada was. I was I bought New Japan World, and I was like, I'm going to pay money to watch Kenny Omega win the title. I don't care who this Okada guy is. And so I walked in like, could not have been more ignorant, right?
Sure.
And then as soon as the match started, I was like, oh, Okada's incredible. Okada's so good. He is unbelievable. It was just like, I couldn't have been more arms crossed walking in.
Boo.
And it was immediately like, oh, holy shit, this is amazing.
Do you remember, was there a specific move that got you, or were you like, okay?
I think by the time, I think it was just Okada. Okada's known for his pinpoint precise drop kicks. And so it's like, as soon as he started hitting those, I was like, oh, wait, maybe this guy's really good. And then it builds to a sequence towards the end of the match where I was just like, I said out loud at 3 in the morning in my empty apartment, I was like, I don't give a shit who wins right now. This is incredible. But walking into this match, I think the story that they were telling, at least from my perspective, is it really felt like Okada was like the face of New Japan. He's at the top of his game, and he's just fully not taking Kenny Omega as an opponent seriously. Because Kenny is sort of this brash bad guy. He's in this disrespectful heel faction. He comes with his two friends, the Young Bucks, and they're kind of getting involved, not necessarily cheating, but doing everything that's like right on the line of helping Kenny cheat. And Okada's just fully willing to meet Kenny wherever he's at. So if Kenny wants to kind of fight a little dirty, Okada will do that. Kenny wants to throw him outside the ring, Okada's got no problem doing that.
Okada will absolutely DDT Kenny's head on the cement.
Will fully do like a flying crossbody over the guardrails. So it's one of those things where it's like Kenny it feels like he's just trying to get in the fight, get in the conversation. And Okada's sort of like, I don't know, hey man, whatever you want to do. I'm the champion. This isn't bothering me.
Yeah.
And what I like about the fight presentation of this match is I think in WWE, a lot of times the momentum will hinge on the underdog kind of getting one or two big moves in. And I think what was cool about this match is you can see Kenny sort of making progress, looking for openings and capitalizing on it. And then I think halfway through, the momentum just kind of starts to shift to the point where you're like, okay, not only is Kenny getting into it, he's starting to dominate the match. And then I think that's when all hell kind of breaks loose and these guys just start going nuts on each other.
I love it.
Okada hits like truly one of the nastiest drop kicks I've ever seen.
And he's just a nasty drop kicker in general. So he's doling these out, and then he hits Kenny with one that, I don't know, hurt me a little bit. Yeah,
it hurt me. And then also, Kenny gives as good as he gets. And I think where the match kind of flips on its head and then it kind of becomes Kenny's match is Kenny gives him a drop kick right back. And I think he like tags him in the back of the head. So he just hits him with this like, bah! And it's just like, oh man, how could you not have your bell rung if that's what's happening?
Right.
So then I think the momentum just starts going wildly back and forth between the two. And it kind of becomes a little bit of a quick draw shootout to be like, look, whoever gets their finisher off first is going to win. And they both know that. And so you can feel the clock ticking for both of them. And it just becomes like reversal, 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 reversal. And that, I think that's where I was like, I give up. I don't even care who wins anymore. This is like, I came in so biased for Kenny Omega. And now I'm like, look, dude, these guys have entertained me to the point I don't even care. And then Okada manages to hit his finisher first. Kenny never able to hit his finisher, the One-Winged Angel. Okada picks up the victory. And so in this series of matches, Okada is 1, Kenny Omega is 0.
And for the listeners, I do apologize. I just realized that we never expanded IWGP.
So the IWGP is the International Wrestling Grand Prix. Because we're in New Japan, we're in the sort of fight sport world. So IWGP is the governing body that presides over all the championships in New Japan, but it's not actually a real thing. It's just sort of, if you were doing a fight sport presentation, this would be the governing body that they kind of use to make creative decisions like that, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Thank you so much. I also realized that we haven't broken down Kenny's and Okada's finishing moves. You mentioned the One-Winged Angel, and Okada's is the Rainmaker. And both of these finishing moves are actually quite get-out-able.
That's the mark of a good finisher, where it's like, I feel like Kenny's is devastating, and they really make it clear that pretty much no one gets out of it. If he hits it, it's over. And so, do you want to explain what the One-Winged Angel is?
Sure. And I have a new friend to help me kind of show what's going on. So I'm Kenny Omega.
For audio listeners, Samee has busted out a puppet.
I busted out a wooden doll, basically. So Kenny will put his opponent on his shoulders, and then he will drop one of their legs over. So there's only one leg on his shoulder and one leg behind his shoulder. And then he takes their midsection from behind and basically throws them down via their back onto the mat, and he spreads his legs also, so they are in between his legs.
So he picks you up and basically slams you on your head and neck, pretty much.
Yeah, awful.
And then Okada's Rainmaker is, he will grab your wrist and then he will just run at you and clothesline you so insanely hard. And usually, as a little extra disrespect, he'll hold on to your arm. So he's like knocked you down and he's still holding on to you. So if he wants to hit you again, he can.
Oh, they're devastating. Just awful.
And then, Samee, what was the official wrestling stopwatch on this first match?
The official wrestling stopwatch for this match is 46 minutes and 46 seconds.
After this match, Kenny Omega kind of disappears from New Japan, and this is where it gets into the like reality of the situation, because at the time we didn't know there was going to be a series of matches. So a lot of people were kind of thinking like, this might be Kenny Omega's only shot at the title. So he disappears. No one really hears from him, and it becomes unclear, like, is his contract up? Is he going to re-sign? Like, what's going on here? And it puts a in real life ticking clock on this whole situation. So nobody really knows what the real deal with Kenny Omega is. So as far as we know at this point, this is the only match in the series. Okada wins. So
while Kenny has disappeared, Okada defends the title 3 more times. And we really don't know where Omega is. And at Wrestling Dontaku 2017, Okada officially challenges Kenny to a rematch.
He challenges Kenny to a rematch at Dominion, which is another big pay-per-view or another big event for New Japan. So it would be kind of the midway point of the year. And it's where a lot of so aside from Wrestle Kingdom, it's where a lot of big matches happen. So I think people were like, Kenny disappears. He says basically, I'm going to sign with New Japan for at least 1 more year. And so this puts it in everybody's head that it's like the only reason he's sticking around is because he wants to win this title.
Right. And he shows up noticeably more shredded than the last time. So even though he wasn't around wrestling, he was definitely training.
Yeah, 100%. And I would also say that Kenny has a lot more of a serious demeanor this time around. Like when he enters the first time, you know, he's dressed like the Terminator. He does all this goofy stuff. And I think he kind of comes completely down to business for this second encounter with Okada.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And his hair is braided this time.
Yeah. I was going to ask, how did you feel braided Kenny fit?
I feel like it was kind of in the same way that MMA fighters who have long hair, they cornrow their hair a little bit. So like Kenny's like ready for business, but guiltily, I was also reminded of like when I was younger and I had long hair and my mom would do my hair before school. And then by the end of the day, obviously you're a kid, you're running around, you're messing up your hair. So it's like all loose and silly. So by the end of this match, I was just like, oh, Kenny's hair is just loose and silly because he's being a small child. But that's
he's gonna roughhouse, he's gonna tumble around. Those braids are gonna fall out.
Yeah. Oh no. Kenny, come on.
And I would say for me, and I don't know if this is how you felt, but I really feel like I could see it all over Okada's face when walking into this second encounter between the two of them, that the first match was very much still in Okada's mind. He seemed kind of, in a sense, haunted by the fact that this guy he wasn't taking seriously almost got the better of him, and he really was walking into this match. It felt like there was a bigger chip on Okada's shoulder than Omega's.
Yeah, I think so. Well, because it's like that same thing of like when you underestimate somebody and then they almost they definitely exceed your expectations, but to the point where they almost overtake you. You're like, when you meet them again, you kind of have to have, and which Okada does have at the beginning of this match, like a very, very stoic, like, okay, you can't shake me this time.
Yeah. And so it was like, I think the walking into this, I really feel like that it's palpable how like heavy this match is. These guys are ready to beat the hell out of each other. And I would say, stacking up, how did you feel the second match was to the first match? Like, do you think the sequel lived up, or were your expectations too high?
I think the sequel did like live up. They were a lot more savage towards each other. Like there was something that happened during this match that didn't quite happen in the first one, is that Okada tweaked his knee, and so there was a specific attack on his knee where Kenny would just be like, had the opportunity to basically just rip at his knee for minutes on end, which, you know, just like added to the severity of like his fire of like wanting this title so badly. I will say though that we didn't mention that this match has a time limit.
To be fair, all matches have a time limit, but this is the match where it comes into play. So there are a bunch of different ways to win a wrestling match. Normally, the way you do it is you get a pinfall over your opponent, but there are other ways you could win. So, for example, if you're out of the ring in New Japan, the count is 20. So if you're out of the ring for longer than 20 seconds, you lose. If you cheat, you get disqualified. If you get in a submission hold and you tap out, you submit. Another way you can lose a wrestling match is you run out of time. So this match, heavyweight title, is a 60-minute time limit. And as they wrestle, it becomes abundantly clear that the time is going to become a huge factor in this match towards the second half. They're being extra brutal on each other, but it goes like 30 minutes. They're still fighting, and it doesn't seem like either one's going to give up. It gets to 40 minutes. It gets to 50 minutes. And then I think the pace really ratchets up because it's like, you've got 10 minutes to beat this guy. So it's like for Kenny, you've got 10 minutes or you don't win the title. And Okada's like, I've got 10 minutes or I can't beat this guy twice in a row.
And Kenny, during this match, actually ends up being able to hit his beloved one-winged angel. However, Okada manages to get his boot onto the ropes. I find this particular part, like, really insulting to Kenny, because the way that Okada gets his leg onto the rope is not like, oh my gosh, and he like luckily his leg luckily fell onto the rope. It was Red Shoes, the ref counts to 2. Then you see Okada's leg kind of like cheekily go up and like tap the rope.
Drapes on the rope.
Just like, you got me. There you go. Like you're allowed one. And bink. And then it's not over at that point.
Yeah. So I guess to clarify is that is a legitimate way to break up a pinfall. Is you either, if you're on your back, you can either kick out or you can grab the rope in some way, and that breaks the pinfall for you. So Kenny hits his devastating finisher, but he does it too close to the ropes. So Okada wouldn't have necessarily had the strength to kick out, but he's able to like be so close to the ropes that he could just barely drape his foot on the rope. And for Samee, it seems like it did something to you.
Well, it tickled me because I feel like it's part of the like in-ring psychology, right? It's just like, oh yeah, you hit it, but it's not good enough.
Yeah.
Like, you're not good enough. Sorry, bro.
You're going to have to do it again. And it's like, at that point, Kenny is so burnt out that it's like, to drag your opponent to the center of the ring, it takes effort that he might not necessarily have.
Right, because they're beating each other for 40 minutes plus.
Yeah, and there was an interesting part that happened in this match that I was curious how you felt about it. So, something, again, because we're trying to keep it to the rivalry, there's been a newcomer in New Japan Pro Wrestling, Cody Rhodes. He's left WWE and he's been making a name for himself in the independent scene. Pops up in New Japan, joins the Bullet Club, and has slowly been starting to creep towards trying to become the leader in a way where it's like he's making machinations towards it, not doing anything overt. He comes out towards the end and he's about to throw in the towel on Kenny's behalf, meaning Kenny basically quits.
Right.
And I was curious, like, how did that feel for you to see?
It didn't feel sincere. And it's not sincere from Cody's end, where Cody was looking out for Kenny. But it also didn't feel sincere in the sense of, like, the Bullet Club was trying to distract Okada, period. So it just kind of didn't feel quite right. And now I know that Cody wanted the top spot, so it like absolutely didn't work at all in my eyes, which and this is just some random information, but I never liked Cody Rhodes. Never. I've only been a fan for a year, but Cody Rhodes doesn't hit it for me. So seeing him do this act to Kenny Omega, he'll never get over it with me.
Do you feel like in the match did it do what its intended effect was, which was to make you angry on Kenny's behalf, or did you feel like it just didn't work in the match itself?
Oh, I think it definitely in story worked. Like it was a slap to Kenny's face for sure. Like, oh, I can see that you're struggling, so I'm gonna make the call for you. And
then you're also saying that you have sort of a personal bias against Cody Rhodes, and so that only added to things where you're like, Kenny's in the biggest match of his career, and here you are trying to make him quit or whatever. So it made you hate him more. Yeah, Cody definitely in that moment made the list. Okay, you just made the list. Interesting. Okay, so I guess my one question is, like, if you were in a fight, would you prefer that I let you lose, or would you ever want me to throw in the towel for you? I feel, here's what it is. We need a safe word where it's like, no matter what happens, and I look like I'm about to quit,
trust in me that I will be able to quit.
Okay. Because I guess the reason people throw in the towel, right, is because fighters are very prideful. And so it's like, Samee, they're not looking out for their own best interests. And so I don't want Samee to die, so I'm going to throw in the towel. And they may be angry at me, but I'm doing it to save their life. So would you rather I let you die or what?
Well, I'm assuming that the fights that we will be getting into will have referees, and the referees are there to prevent death. However, if we're in street fights, if we're gonna be engaging in street fighting, Michael, definitely throw in the towel. When when I look like I'm actually being beaten to death, intervene.
Okay, cool. I think that makes sense. Where it's like, if we're in a regulated sport, I'll trust you as a fighting champion to know your limits.
Of course.
But if we're in a street fight, where notoriously in street fights they honor a towel being thrown in, I will look out for your best interest.
Yeah, please do. Would you want me to throw in a towel for you, Michael?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was one of those things. I would trust you to vibe it out and be like, you know what? Yeah, this one's getting too brutal. I got to throw in the towel here. I would trust you to do it. But I also would trust that you would not throw in the towel to betray me like Cody Rhodes did.
Was you texting me while you were stuck in the massage chair? Were you looking for me to throw in the towel for you by telling you to get out of the chair?
I think if you had told me to, I would have done it.
Oh, shit. Okay. Okay.
So what was the official wrestling stopwatch on this one, Samee?
1 hour exactly, because that was the time limit.
That is right, because the way this match ends is a time limit draw. These men fight for an hour straight and neither can decisively win. It ends with Okada crawling to finally be able to beat Kenny Omega, put this rivalry, and before he can get to the cover, time runs out. Nobody wins. Okada 1, Kenny 0, 1 draw.
How did you feel about this match?
I think for me, it got spoiled that it was a 60-minute time limit draw. And so I think for me, it took away I mean, don't get me wrong, this match is incredible, but I think it took away the mystique where you're like, well, I know these guys are going to fight for an hour. And so to me, the tension is kind of gone when you're at until you're at 40 minutes in, because then it feels like the match kicks off properly. I think most people would agree that this is the best of the series. For me personally, it does not rank quite as high, but I mean, don't get we're talking about, a 100 and a 99, you know what I mean? So it's like, totally. It's not that this match sucks or anything. It's just, for me personally, I think the fact that it's an hour, if you go in knowing that that's the case, I think it robs a little bit of the stakes and the tension for you, because I would imagine if I had been watching this live, it would build inside of me that it's like, oh my God, this is going to go. They're going to go the distance here. And that would be more fun. Whereas when you walk in with that expectation, you sort of know what the deal is. Yeah,
fair. Yeah. I feel the same way, but it wasn't that it was that I was keeping in mind that it was an hour long and that kind of cheapened it. The moment that I was kind of taken out of it was when it was clear that they weren't going to pin each other without doing their finishing move first. And that's when I was taken out of it. Okay, well they're running the clock. But yeah, again, it is a beautiful, beautiful match, and the people that say that it is incredible, they're not wrong.
So from coming out of this match, like we said, New Japan, these two matches have sent shockwaves through the entire wrestling community. So people are firmly aware of New Japan and are firmly interested. And so New Japan is capitalizing on this. They start running events in the United States. And so to sort of show some goodwill, they create the IWGP United States Championship, and they have a special tournament in Long Beach that Kenny Omega wins. He becomes the inaugural IWGP United States champion. And so a lot of people got concerned because they were like, oh, well, they put a title on Kenny, so they might not give him the top title he's been looking for. This might be sort of a peacemaker deal, but they're still building their company off of his reputation, but they're not giving him the top prize in the industry or whatever. So a few months later, we are now at the G1 Climax again. So a year later, G1 Climax 2017. And like we said, every wrestler fights every other wrestler in New Japan, meaning Kenny Omega fights Okada in the G1 Climax. Important to note, the IWGP Heavyweight Championship is not on the line. And so I think, to me, this one gets ranked pretty low in people's top 4. But I really think that, like, because the title isn't on the line, and like we were saying, the previous encounter was so heavy, this really just felt like we can kind of blow off some steam. And like, Kenny's walking in with a title of his own, so he's got like a little bit extra swagger here. And like, in a lot of ways, the pressure's off. And because it's the G1 Climax, they have a 30-minute time limit for this. So in the previous 2 matches, there's sort of a lengthy feeling out process that I think is very necessary for those matches. But they just jump straight to the second half of a match, and they just start going nuts on each other.
Yeah, this feels, number one, the G1 Climax sounds fucking exhausting. And what an event to hold, and like tell all of your workers, I guess, like, oh, you're gonna face all of your coworkers for a month long. LOL. Bye. That's fucked up, but also incredible. And I don't want it to make it seem like we have the same opinions automatically because, like, you're opening the door to all this stuff. I also feel like this is like a really, really great match, even though a lot of people rate it lower. I independently titled it "The Boys Are Back in Town" because of how fast-paced and enjoyable these two men in their prime beating each other is.
I do think this match felt a lot looser and a lot freer in a lot of ways, where it's like, yeah, these guys are just going for broke, but it just seemed like, because the title wasn't on the line, that they could just have a lot more fun.
Yeah, they have a lot more fun slamming each other's heads into the mat.
Yeah. And it's like, it's also important to say, like, Okada is a fighting champion. So it's like, you can just see the wear and tear building on it. I think he comes in with a bandaged up neck, and Kenny just goes nuts on that injury and is like really targeting, like rips the bandages off and is just really going nuts on Okada's neck during this. Like, so many kicks, so many chops, so many like drops directly on this like injured neck. It's really brutal to watch, but in the end, like, Kenny hits the one-winged angel dead center of the ring. Kenny Omega wins, bringing the series to Kenny Omega 1, Okada 1 draw. But sadly, since the title was not on the line, Kenny Omega still does not win the IWGP Heavyweight Championship.
That's humiliating a little bit, don't you think? Or like, not humiliating, frustrating.
Yeah,
well, I finally won.
Yeah, the pressure's off. I'm able to, and in a lot of ways, that's kind of how I felt, where it's like, because Kenny had so much pressure on himself to win, I think this match was very important for him to be like, it is possible, and I had been getting in my own way.
Sure.
And so because it was a little bit looser, a little bit freer, Kenny was able to pick up the victory. What was the official wrestling stopwatch on this?
The official wrestling stopwatch is 24 minutes and 41 seconds. And before we button this one up and go to the next match, I do want to say that the commentators, again, make note of how noticeably more shredded Kenny is this match versus the last match. So he's doing his own like King's Road with his body in this series of matches with Okada.
He's been beefing up significantly as he's been every match. Again, it almost feels like Dragon Ball Z or something, where it's like, I'm extra beefed for this fight or whatever. So it's like he's really
extra beefed.
Yeah, so Kenny has like really been putting in the work. And there was just this one moment that I thought was so funny that I think was such an excellent touch. So the Young Bucks who come out to the ring with Kenny, they do this thing where it's like they're putting all these ice packs on Okada because he's so like hurt and injured, and then then Matt Jackson just walks up, steals one of the ice packs off of Okada's lifeless body, and then he puts it on Kenny, his friend. And I was just like, that's just such a dick move. It's so funny to me. I'm just like, what a dick. Like,
well, what's funny also is like that happens, and that almost is a metaphor of like how the crowd's reaction has been changing through the series of matches, where in the beginning, in the first one, it was all Kazuchika Okada, all Rainmaker. And by the third one, you're hearing that it's a lot more 50-50, where people are catching on to Omega. And I would say that maybe even in this third one, there are more fans like behind Omega than Okada.
And they're panning around the crowd, and it's like you see women with like Canadian flags and like little Terminator bears that are supposed to be Kenny Omega, and they're just like, this dude is popular. People are loving Kenny Omega at this point. Like we said, though, this is not for the title. So Kenny moves on to the G1 Climax Finals, where he fights a guy named Tetsuya Naito. And so what's important, there's a bunch of important stuff to note about Tetsuya Naito, especially in the context of this feud. So Kenny has fought Naito and defeated him in years past. So Kenny is walking into a thing where he's like, I have momentum over this guy. I've beaten him several times in this exact position. But Tetsuya Naito is currently embroiled in his own deep 4-year-long feud with Kazuchika Okada. So Naito has his own like deep claim to this title. And so both men in the finals go to absolute war on each other because again, I was only familiar with Kenny Omega, but it's like both these men need this title shot. And if you watch this match, it is 100% reflective of that. And I think a lot of people widely agree that this is one of, if not the greatest G1 Climax final ever. So definitely worth your time. Definitely worth checking out. Like, both men are fighting like they need this because they do. And in the end, Naito picks up the victory, meaning he's going to go to Wrestle Kingdom to fight for the championship, and Kenny Omega is not. I'm going to do just like the briefest aside because I think it's important, because it really, I think, highlights what the stakes are for this fight. So, Tetsuya Naito, who is he? His feud with Okada generally goes back about 4 years to 2014. Both men were going to be fighting in the main event of Wrestle Kingdom, but at the time, fans were not super hot on Tetsuya Naito. They were like, we don't really give a shit about this guy. So they gave them the choice. They were like, who do you want to have be the main event of Wrestle Kingdom? Do you want Okada and Naito? Or do you want, I believe it was Shinsuke Nakamura for the Intercontinental Championship? And so the fans were immediately like, we love Shinsuke. He's the main event. And so they get bumped. They're still on the card, but they get bumped. And then Naito fights Okada and loses. And this sends Naito into a tailspin. He ends up like going over to Mexico for a little while, and he becomes involved with this group called Los Ingobernables. So he comes back as the representative of Los Ingobernables in Japan, and he starts the group Los Ingobernables de Japón, LIJ for short. In 2017, 2018, all the real ones were like, yeah, sure, everybody's got Bullet Club shirts, but like, if you're really about this, you know LIJ is where it's at. So like the real wrestling heads would have LIJ shirts instead of Bullet Club shirts. Just a fun little thing.
Headmaster's gonna headmaster.
I'm just saying, like, I'm just giving you the context. So it's like LIJ was a big deal, is my point. Right. And so when Naito comes back, he has fully changed his character, and now he's kind of this aloof bad boy villain kind of guy who seems like he doesn't really take anything seriously. And in fact, he wins the Intercontinental Championship and just starts throwing it in the air, throwing it on the ground, breaking it. Like, he really doesn't care. And again, like a true bad boy, this makes fans love him. They're like, we love Naito. This is so great. So now Naito, with the full support of the fans, moves into the main event of Wrestle Kingdom, which 4 years ago he was denied. And he's fighting the opponent who 4 years ago he couldn't win or he couldn't beat. And so now, like, Naito, if he's going to win the title, he has a really legitimate and real shot to win the IWGP Heavyweight Championship from Okada. And here's the important thing. If Naito picks up this title, it almost completely ruins the Okada Omega feud because, like, again, Kenny beat Okada at the G1, but it didn't matter because he didn't beat him for the title. And so it's like, okay, so maybe Kenny can beat Naito for the title, but he didn't beat Okada. And so it's like Okada will always have one over on him unless Kenny can win the title from him. So it's like this puts this feud in real jeopardy. So people walking into Wrestle Kingdom were really upset because they were like, we don't know how much longer Kenny is going to be in New Japan. We don't know if he's ever going to win the title. And like now, Naito might have a legitimate claim to this and he might win it. But what that does is that completely counts out the kind of champion Okada was, because walking into the main event, when the stakes are high, you know Okada's going to deliver. Okada gets the victory and he walks away 1, 2, 3 with the championship. So Okada picks up the title. But like meanwhile, like shit is just falling apart on Kenny Omega's side. There's so much weird infighting starting to happen within the Bullet Club, the group that he's in. And then also Kenny is starting to like become less of a villain and more of a hero. And so he's kind of rejecting the Bullet Club. And then Cody Rhodes is trying to usurp him and tensions boil over to where Cody attacks Kenny like in the ring during
Shame on you, Cody. Shame on
like
you.
weeks afterwards. And so like during that fight, Kenny shoves one of the Young Bucks away, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, we're hurt. We don't know if we can stand by you anymore, dude." So he starts to distance himself from the Bullet Club, and then who should reappear but the man who got him into wrestling in Japan in the first place, his tag team partner Kota Ibushi. They start to become friends again. They rekindle their friendship. They begin training harder than ever. And so as we walk into the next encounter, it's like these men have become like super solid. And Kenny finally starts to be on the right, like I almost said the straight and narrow, but I just don't know if that's true.
Why do you say that, Michael?
Because everything I know about the Golden Lovers is it's very unclear, like, are they bros? Are they more? Do they hate each other? Do they love each other? Like, it's just is truly a lot of ingredients sprinkled in.
The Golden Lovers is a tag team up of Kenny and Kota Ibushi.
Yes, the tag team they're in together, they're called the Golden Lovers, and it's like they could very well be actually lovers, but to me it is sort of like all we know is they're together a lot. They train hard, you know?
Beautiful. Beautiful. Do they kiss? I think they kiss, right?
Do you tell me, have they?
I thought so.
Look, Google it.
All right, pause the pod. We got it.
Yeah, we're pausing it. I got it. We're doing a really quick research break.
Yeah, we're not going to cut this, but we are going to research.
What are you Googling right now?
Kenny Omega.
I googled
Kiss.
have the Golden Lovers ever kissed each other?
I'm googling Kenny Omega kiss Kota
Anyway, there's 2 documented Golden Lovers kisses for you, and Kenny really said that they were gonna get married authentically. We have the same credentials, but our attitudes are much more varied. I think the love we have for each other is based on trust and a common goal.
Aw.
And then here's a Reddit, a collection of Kenny Omega kissing Kota Ibushi. It's empty. It doesn't show anything.
Well, in that case, let me just share you my screen. There they are.
Love wins. They kiss.
Yay! But does that make 2 men lovers? No.
No, you can kiss your bro and not not be in love with him.
Yeah, my longstanding policy is kiss your friends. Why not? So what? So while Kenny is stepping away from the Bullet Club and stepping towards Kota Ibushi, Okada is defending the IWGP title against anybody who steps to him, basically. So I think it's really important to know that outside of the rivalry between Okada and Omega, Okada is in a rivalry with everyone. So he's just basically exhausting himself fighting everyone off of this damn title that he has. He loves it, but he's also burdened by it. So Okada and Omega agree again to clash again while at Wrestling Dontaku 2018.
They set the match for Dominion. So their hour-long time limit draw happened at Dominion last year. So a year later, they're going to fight at Dominion again. And what's interesting about this match is it's going to be 2 out of 3 falls, meaning to win, you have to pin your opponent 2 times. And there will be no time limit to this match. So if they're going to, they could very well fight forever. But the whole point is this match will end definitively.
Right. So this is the type of match that everyone was kind of waiting for, I think. So they met. Was there an actual time limit on the first time that they met?
Yeah, there's a time. The thing is in wrestling is like there's always a time limit, but it rarely ever goes that long. So the only reason the time limit is coming into play is because in their last official encounter, time ran out on them. So they're basically like, these guys are going to fight until there's a winner.
Does the fact that it's like a 2 out of 3, is that just a smart way of like, this is it, you guys? Like you don't have anything else. Like when you pin your opponent twice in one match, there's no question you're the guy.
This gets into, we dipped into wrestling psychology a little bit, right? And so I think the way to look at this is like, even though it's a very realistic match, it's still what's called a gimmick match. And so basically, ideally you want the style of match to suit the story that you're telling, right? So let's say, for example, you and I are fighting and I keep having cronies come in and cheat and win. And so eventually you challenge me to a cage match. And so that way no one can get involved and it's just you and me alone. And so the story they're telling, right, is that we need there to be a decisive, definitive winner in this. And so they take it, they raise the stakes as much as they can. And the only way to do it is to raise the stakes into like a gimmick match, meaning not only do you have to win twice.
So Kenny arrives to the ring with not his Bullet Club buddies, the Young Bucks, but with Kota Ibushi. And Okada is accompanied, as always, by Gedo. And what's interesting about this match, like right away, it's very noticeable that nobody is cheering for Okada. It's all about Kenny.
And I would also say, like, Kenny's presentation from the first encounter to this final encounter is like night and day. Like, Kenny is now blonde and is like acting very honorably at the beginning of the match and has this like insane promo video before the match where like Kota Ibushi appears to him as literally an angel, and he's like, "What did it cost you, Kenny?" And Kenny's like, and you could see like, the Bullet Club exploding, and he's like, "It cost me everything," or whatever. And so I think in a lot of ways, the overarching story that's being told is Kenny has become who he needs to be. You know what I mean? Like all the Bullet Club, all the tricks, all the cheating that was standing in his way. And if he had just trained hard, fought honorably, and been around people like Kota Ibushi who love him, now he's able to like finally meet Okada on Okada's level. Meanwhile, And I think in this feud, Okada really gets a short shrift because people were like me, we're super Omega biased. And so you see like Okada does not falter at any point. You know what I mean? And he's been fighting hard. He's held the belt for what, like 3 years, something like that?
Yeah, by 2018, he's had it for
2 years.
2 years, yeah.
This guy has been the face of New Japan, fighting everybody in incredible matches. The quality has not dipped for 2 years. So I think a lot of times when you get to this level of athlete in wrestling, you know, you've got your John Cena's and your Roman Reigns's and stuff like that. And I think a lot of times, because they're so consistent at such a high level, that you take it for granted. You know what I mean? And so this series of matches would not be what it is without having Okada as Omega's partner. Like Omega is one of my favorites, like incredible wrestler, but like he needs to have someone at that same level for them to do the magic that they did or whatever. So again, I just want to give Okada his flowers in this feud because, like, yeah, you're right. He's walking into this, and at this point, it's been 2 years. The crowd has now fully embraced Kenny Omega. Almost 100% Omega cheers. And then Kenny is like walking in blonde, you know, like extra beefy, and like is ready to go. And I think even the temperature of the matches, they're treating each other like equals for the first time. And it becomes, you know, it starts off gentlemanly, and then, you know, let's be real, these guys have been beating the hell out of each other, so it devolves pretty quickly into just an all-out war between these two top athletes.
100%. And I mentioned this at the top of the episode, but like they've met each other so many times at this point, but they're also, again, just like both highly trained athletes. They trust each other so much, and that's why they can pummel each other as hard as they do, which is it's really nice and cute.
Absolutely. So like we said, this is a 2 out of 3 falls match. The first pin is almost pretty surprising, because I would say Kenny Omega is kind of running the show for the first, like 20, 30 minutes. And then out of nowhere, Okada like sticks him and gets the first pinfall. So now it's like all the pressure is now on Kenny to be like, okay, you got to get 2 in a row. You know what I mean? And now, like, again, Okada, it's like it loosens him up a little bit. Like he could potentially take a pinfall, and then like that allows him to like wear Kenny down. And so all of a sudden it puts this like insane tension on the match to be like, Kenny was dominating, and now he's automatically on the back foot again.
Which would probably, and I'm assuming did, mess with him psychologically, because not only did he dominate the momentum, right, of the first half, but Okada just snuck in that pin, and now Okada's like on fire because he got a pin. So now it's just like, it's all just like extra heavy on Kenny now. I also want to mention that Okada's in pants this time. He's been wrestling in trunks. Now he's in pants. What's he hiding?
You know, I think it's just like, I think it's sort of like, you know, sometimes you're like, I'm going to dress up for work today. You know what I mean? Like, let me like put on slacks. Like, let me put on a jacket or a tie. And so I think Okada was like, you know what? Let me do my formal wrestling wear this time. Let me put on
cover
pants
up my
for this.
knees.
Yeah. And I think at this point, like the intensity really starts to ratchet up. And like, Samee, were there any moves or sequences that really stuck out to you?
I think what sticks out to me is this move that Kenny does, where he says, "You can't escape," but in this match and the previous match, Okada does escape
almost immediately.
That's a lot of confidence in a move that is definitely escapable. But he does it. He does it in this match. He does it. Okada gets out of it. Kenny sets it up again, and he goes, "Okay, now you can't escape." This is like, all right, buddy. Like, I love the determination for sure. So Kenny finally gets to hit the one-winged angel and pins Okada for the first time. And that happens around 20 minutes after Okada's first pin on Kenny.
So we're about like 50 minutes into the match when that happens.
Right. And in between these pins, they get a 2-minute break. Okada does not get up after this pin.
Yeah, he's down for 2 minutes and he straight up looks dead, dude.
And it does just speak to the like destructive properties of the one-winged angel. Like when it is finally done, he is out for 2 minutes and is possibly dead.
This like last phase of the match is, again, I'm sure these guys are for real exhausted, but they're certainly selling this like they've got nothing left and still they're continuing to like pull more and more out of themselves. And yeah, it builds into like a series of one-winged angels that allows Kenny to finally hit the second pinfall, wins the title, and then we end the series with Kenny Omega 2, Okada 1, and 1 draw.
Yeah, what's sad about it was a little bit sad watching this match is because they're like actually sobbing. They're like, you know, when you hurt yourself, you're like,
yeah,
like they're
the emotions are so high that the exhaustion is so real. They're like pulling everything possible, and then someone still manages to like kick out, and there is that like mental. Again, it really feels like a boxing match and like a real fight, right? It has those like right. Like you're seeing the momentum shift, you're seeing the anger, you're seeing the confusion, the frustration, the exhaustion.
When people say that wrestling's not real, but then stuff like this exists where these guys were wrestling for an hour, 9 minutes, and 50 seconds. Like, what other sport you're not even just like depending on a team. Are you doing your sport for an hour long?
Doing like intense lifting and running and jumping and flipping and chopping. Yeah, absolutely. For an hour straight, an hour and 9 minutes for this final match. Just as like an epilogue, Kenny Omega goes on to, I think, hold the title for a little less than a year, and he ends up losing to Tanahashi, I believe, who is the man we sort of started this whole cycle with, Chaos, and then pretty quickly after he loses the title to Tanahashi, he disappears, and the new company, All Elite Wrestling, starts. But that is a story for a different episode.
And so after this devastating loss, Okada like goes through like an identity crisis, and he is fully embracing the wrestling in pants identity, and he starts a Summer of Smiles where he enters the ring with balloons every time, and he's noticeably just losing so much, almost like in the beginning of his career. Like his loss percentage like just like ratchets up for a long time.
What did the balloons signify? Like, is he trying to cheer himself up, do you think? Or do you think it's like, or is it like, or is it truly like he suffered such a devastating, humiliating loss? He's like, hey guys, I'm really into balloons now. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, oh my God, my friend has gone insane. You know, like when your friend goes through a massive breakup and they're like, hey, I dyed my hair red. And you're like, oh, and you're okay? And they're like, yeah, I feel great.
Yeah, I'm totally fine. And he does dye his hair red.
Yeah, I was just guessing. But yeah, it is one of those things where it's like, do you think it was coming from like this is a broken man? Or is it like...
a broken man for sure. What's funny is that like, this isn't the first time that Okada goes through an identity crisis because of losing. It's like he really takes this stuff seriously.
That's why he's the best. And so, Samee, that is the Okada-Omega feud. Was it as iconic as everybody says that it was? Like, just doing the research and watching the matches, how did you feel?
Yeah, I think it is definitely an iconic rivalry. It does open the door to want to know what else, like what other rivalries were happening in New Japan.
My question for you as a new wrestling fan is, okay, we've gotten a little bit of the WWE, and we've gotten a taste of some of the independent scenes in America, and now we've gotten a taste of New Japan Pro Wrestling. How was that? Like, what stuck out to you is like, did you seem to enjoy one more than the other, or are there aspects of one that you really enjoy?
I think I really like how New Japan presents its matches and its wrestlers. I think having that what do you call it, sports?
Yeah, like boxing, fight sport, combat sport kind of feel.
Yeah, the fight sport feel is really cool, but that doesn't take away like my interest in like the nuttiness of the Attitude Era and WWE.
And I think for me, just sort of revisiting this whole rivalry and thinking back on me, myself, and where I was at in my wrestling journey when this all was happening, I think it gets into, I think you'll find that a lot of times a major critique people have of American wrestling is there isn't called long-term storytelling, right? Where especially in the WWE, the story cycles will be about a month, right? Where it's like from one pay-per-view to the next pay-per-view, and that's generally how it works, right? And so what fans long for is stories like the ones we just experienced, where it's like they want a year, 2-year long stories, but I think that is actually a really scary proposition because a lot of things can happen in like a real fight. Like somebody could get injured, somebody could move to a different company. And so as fun as this story is to revisit, we have the clarity of knowing that there was going to be 4 matches. But at the time, we didn't know that. And so we were really on the ride the entire time being like, we don't know if this is ever going to end. And I remember myself being impatient and not letting the story fully play out and thinking to myself, like, why couldn't Kenny have won the first time? You know, why couldn't he have won the second time? And it isn't until I see the story fully play out that I'm able to be like, well, if he had won the first time, there wouldn't have been 4 amazing matches that we all got to see. And so I think a lot of times as a wrestling fan, I want that long-term storytelling, but I get fearful that it's not going to pan out. And so sometimes it can get really hard to trust the vision of creative people. And in the WWE specifically, creatively, we've all been burned so many times to where there is no trust for the WWE to pay something off in a long-term storytelling. Another little postscript that I want to throw into this, and like a very real wrinkle, was it's a little bit delicate, but I think it's worth noting that a lot of this tension was coming into play because there was a lot of like the fate of New Japan got tied up in this rivalry, right? Where it's like, are they going to put the title on this man who is like one of the hottest wrestlers in the world, but is still ultimately not a Japanese wrestler? Or are they going to continue to stick with a Japanese wrestler who is the face of New Japan Pro Wrestling? And I want to commend New Japan for being like, at the end of the day, the smartest decision we could make for business is to like put the title on the most popular, most beloved, best wrestler after putting him through like a decent storytelling. Because again, in America especially, we're pretty notorious for having language be a barrier, right? Like certain wrestlers cannot achieve heights because they don't necessarily speak English or they're not American born. And so all that to say, like, WWE, for the love of fucking God, put the goddamn title on Shinsuke Nakamura. He is so good and he like can deliver. And it's like, because of our own stupid political bullshit, people are like, well, I don't know if we can put it on him. You absolutely can. And you should put the title on Shinsuke. He deserves it. He's been working hard enough. So Samee, that was Wrestling Academy episode 3. How do we feel?
We feel
what's
good.
Next?
We feel good. We feel great. We feel prepared to take on the next episode's subject, which is the one and only Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
That's right. We're covering the career of the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, and he just so happens to be my favorite wrestler of all time. So I am so excited to like fully dive in, because here's the thing, Samee, like he's done some wild shit, and I can't wait for you to just like fully experience that.
I know that I will be 100% overwhelmed.
Yeah, because he's had some hits, and boy, oh boy, has he had some misses, and we're going to get into those too.
Well, that is next episode, but thank you for listening to this episode of Wrestling Academy, which was hosted, produced, edited by Michael Klasek and me, Samee Junio. You can follow Wrestling Academy on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Wrestling Academy Pod. Send us an email with your thoughts, please be nice, to wrestlingacademypod@gmail.com. And if you want to check out our website, go to wrestlingacademy.university. Yes! That is actually our URL. We spent a lot of money on it, so please go check it out.
That's right, because we commit to the bit. And something we would love to know about you, because like I would say you and I are both like very new to New Japan. So it's like if there are any epic rivalries that are similar to Okada Omega that we could just like really sink our teeth into, please reach out and let us know. And it doesn't have to necessarily be New Japan, right? Like we could go... Like, if you want to get into some Four Pillars stuff, I don't know anything about those guys. So, like, let us know. Just something that's, like, specifically in the realm of Japanese wrestling, we would love to know.
Yeah, sure. And while you're in a participating mood, go to listen to us on Spotify, because we have Q&As and polls for every episode. Fuck my life. Class is dismissed.
Class dismissed. I thought you did great. What do you...